good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming on this chilly evening. I appreciate it. This is our final lecture for right now, anyway, on Italy. So tonight we'll be spending our time in Rome. We've been kind of wallowing around in Florence and Rome and the Italian Renaissance and the Italian Baroque for the last many months. I think it's been 6 or 7 months that we've been doing this, and we're changing. We're moving to a new century and a new country, which I'll reveal at the end. Some of you might know already. So this is our final send off to Italy tonight, until I get tired of the next one, and then we'll probably come back to Italy. So welcome to the gallery. I know there are a few newcomers to our lecture series here tonight. My name is Sarah Jones, and I'm the curator here at the gallery, and I'm also an art historian. And this is just part of our educational campaign here at the gallery. And just something I have a great time doing this. So just kind of part of our just part of our programming here. We do film all of our lectures, and all of our past lectures are on our website. If you go to the it's Jones, there are cards up there. But then there's a media page, and then there's the lecture series on film. So my brother Caleb does all of the editing and the filming. So thanks to Caleb for his technical support as always. So maybe some of you were here a few weeks ago when I introduced Lorenzo Bernini, who is the king of the Roman Baroque. So Bernini is. Really, Rome is a city of Bernini. You really can't escape him. He made this indelible impact on the architecture and the art and the feeling, and then the public squares, the public spaces in Rome, which we'll be talking about tonight. So just like in Florence, the way that it's an artist like Brunelleschi or Donatello or Michelangelo pop up everywhere from every space and every square, is the same in Rome with Bernini. And so Bernini was as I mentioned last time, he's probably best known as a sculptor, but he was also a painter. He did this self-portrait and an architect. So he's a lot like Michelangelo. He was kind of touted as the inheritor to Michelangelo, the Michelangesque tradition. So being a multifaceted artist and being able to handle kind of any aspects of art and architecture. And I should also talk about this a bit, we're in the Baroque period. So this is the 1600s in Italy. It's also called the Counter-Reformation as well. So we are after the Reformation has happened. So we're after the church has been split in Europe. There was a great tumultuous period in the kind of early to mid 1500s where Martin Luther, that pesky Martin Luther, kind of tore things asunder a bit with his 95 Theses. And so the Protestant church has split off. The Church of England has also split. So it was a time of great consternation and chaos, spiritual and political chaos throughout the 1500s in Europe. And the 1600s marked a time of, like I said, of counter-reformation. So this is the church, the Catholic Church, regrouping and reasserting its might and power and influence. And so we're looking the Italian Baroque is very much linked with this idea of the counter-reformation. So the Catholic Church trying to show through art what they're all about and reassert their power and authority over the world, which we'll see tonight. We met Cardinal Scipione Borghese last lecture. So luckily for Bernini and for a lot of these artists that we've talked about so far, he caught the attention of a wealthy patron. And the Borgheses in Rome are part of they're a big, powerful, wealthy family. I'd like you to think tonight too about if you can kind of conjure up the idea of roving bands of competing familial interests. Okay, we're talking about various family factions tonight. So it's a lot like Romeo and Juliet, where there are the Capulets and the Montagues, and the Montagues and the Capulets are always kind of angling for power and authority and influence in their particular city. So it's very much like this, and so the Borgheses are one of these mighty, powerful families in Rome. And Scipione Borghese noticed the young Bernini when Bernini was working with his father on a church in Rome. It was a commission for Scipione's uncle, Pope Paul. It's very convenient having your uncle as the Pope. Nepotism. So Pope Paul V was also a great patron of Bernini, and under the Borghese influence, especially Scipione Borghese, Bernini, the young Bernini, created a series of sculptures which really rocketed him to fame and fortune in his early life. So he's in his 20s when he's creating these works. We looked at the Rape of Persephone last session. And these are works in the Borghese Gallery, which is a famous gallery museum in Rome that you can still visit. This is the Apollo and Daphne. There are three things that you should know about Baroque art and architecture. They're in the ways that it's different from what came before. So it's very different from the Renaissance art. What earmarks the Baroque period is a sense of movement and drama and theatricality. So there's always a feeling in Baroque sculpture and Baroque architecture that something is about to change. If we move the clock forward even just a second, then the scene and the figures, the composition will be completely different. So they're caught in a moment of climax typically. It's also very theatrical. So this is a moment when Apollo he's trying to catch Daphne to have his way with her, and she's about to turn into a tree. I won't get into that story. We covered that last time. Greek mythology. So it's very theatrical, and in the way that they're spinning in space also, and it's moments of high drama. So movement, drama, and theatricality, and it's breaking down the barriers between the viewer and the subject. So there's this great invasion of our space, wherein in Renaissance architecture and art, it's so the Renaissance, this is 1400s, early 1500s, so the period preceding the Baroque period is about composure, and it's very contained, and it's calm, and it's balanced. So if you think of Michelangelo's David, kind of standing, he's very, there's no sense that he could stand there for an eternity, right? We're not capturing him in a moment of climax or movement, that he's contained within his space. As opposed to Bernini's depiction of the same figure of David, where he's spinning in space. Look at that face, he's biting his lip, he's about to loose the rock, and he's this pent-up energy, he's pulling his arm back, and is ready to explode out of his space, or out of his niche. So high drama, high theater, lots of movement. So Bernini's doing pretty well. He's done these three, well, there are others, but these three major sculptures for Cardinal Borghese. Luckily for Bernini, there's lots of B's tonight. I'm going to try to keep these all straight. B's. So luckily for Bernini, the next pope to come to power was the Barberini Pope. He's Maffeo Barberini, and he becomes Pope Urban the VIII. And he has a long, long papacy. You can see 1623 to 44. And the Barberinis and the Borgheses were aligned factions. So they were pals. So any artist who was friends with Scipione Borghese was going to be a friend of Maffeo Barberini. And even better than a cardinal is a pope. If a pope likes you, oh boy. And so this was really, really good for Bernini. Bernini was Bernini ascendant for the 20 years that Maffeo Barberini was in power. There are all kinds of busts that Barberini created, I've already done it, that Bernini created of Maffeo Barberini. So you can see these are all over the place in Rome, and kind of the wonderful naturalism, and again this kind of I keep coming back to the word naturalism, but it feels like he's about to speak, right? So there still is, even though this is a very kind of reserved portrait, but there still is a sense of drama and theater here that he's about to open his mouth and say something. It's always good when the Pope wants you to do his portrait, right? Like that's a good sign. He's in favor. Bernini's doing well. Bernini was also hired to work on the family palace, the Palazzo Barberini. Palazzo is Italian for palace. So the family home, the ancestral Barberini home, good gig. Oh, just another note. I did a series of lectures on Caravaggio. If you're a Caravaggio fan, go. This is now a gallery and a museum, so you can go to the Palazzo Barberini, and nobody's ever there. Nobody ever goes, but they have Caravaggio's Judith beheading Holofernes. It's so good. I think I'm going to do. I was thinking about doing a lecture, and see now I'm past Italy, and I'll have to save this now for next year. But so this is a scene from a kind of an obscure story from the Bible where Judith is like beheading taking the head off a general, kind of a Persian general, and there are all kinds of depictions of her throughout art history by various artists, and it's just like, and there are women artists who also depict this scene. So anyways, it's really great, like women wreaking revenge on men. So I thought that might be a great lecture title, like women getting even or something. I don't know. Violent women. I don't know. We'll come up with something. Where was I? Yes. So if you like Caravaggio, make sure you go to the Palazzo Barberini. Also, this is again it's a bit of a side note, but it does kind of tie in with what I was talking about in some of our Florence lectures, where I mentioned that these rich families, so the Medici in the case of Florence, were very aware of the propagandistic value of commissioning art and architecture, and they would make sure that everybody knew that Lorenzo Medici commissioned this work. Lorenzo Medici furnished this chapel, or the Medici family built this monastery by planting their family crest everywhere. And so the Barberini family crest are bees, the Barberini bees. So you look for the bees. They're all over the place in Rome. Also, what you can keep an eye out for when you're in Rome are the keys, the papal keys. This is Maffeo Barberini's way of saying, I am Barberini and I am also Pope, right? So these are these crossed keys that come up again and again. And this is something that all of the Baroque popes, who may have hated each other's guts, this was something they could agree on, were the keys. And so the story with this and the symbolism behind this is that there's a passage in the Bible, you might know this, there's a note in the Bible where Christ gives the keys to heaven to Peter the apostle. So Peter has the keys to heaven. I'm sure it's metaphorical, but the Catholic Church is like, they grab onto this as an idea. And Peter is ostensibly, they kind of set him up as the first pope of the Catholic Church. So there's Peter, there's the subsequent popes, and there are the keys to heaven. And so they latch onto this, the Baroque aesthetic and the Baroque agenda, the Counter-Reformation agenda, starts planting keys everywhere. When you go to St. Peter's, basically any Baroque church in Rome, you'll be whapped over the head with these enormous keys. And you can just, the thought process, the propagandistic thought process behind this act is so charmingly clear, because it's like, you can just kind of like feel them being like Martin Luther, so the followers of Martin Luther and the ones who are drifting towards Protestantism. It's like, okay, you want to follow Martin Luther, that's fine. Who has the keys? Does Martin Luther have the keys to heaven? Oh, no, we have the keys. Do you want to go to heaven? You're going to need a key. Christ said there are keys. Better come back. You'll see there's like look in every corner in St. Peter's. It's just keys. He also created, this is the Trevi Fountain in the Piazza Barberini. So Piazza is, again, these P words. Palazzo is palace. Piazza is a square, is a public square. So this is the Piazza Barberini just outside, or just kind of adjacent to the Palazzo Barberini. And this is one of Bernini's early fountains. We'll be talking more about his later fountain, his big fountain. But look at the bee, the Barberini bee. And then he moves on to the big projects. Oh, there's big money here. So Pope Urban VIII, so this is the Barberini Pope, decides he wants to completely revamp the interior of St. Peter's Basilica, which is, of course, the cornerstone of the Catholic Church. So this is a very important part of the Counter-Reformation. And he begins with the Baldacchino. The Baldacchino of St. Peter's, this is the tomb. This is the tomb of St. Peter's. St. Peter is supposedly buried beneath this. And this is an enormous bronze structure. Just to give you a sense of scale. I know, right? This is a person. Just to frame this up a bit. It's so, St. Peter's is so incredibly overwhelming, and that's what the intention is. So part of the Baroque is to awe and overwhelm, right? So again, it's the idea that the Catholic Church has all the money and has all the power and has all the might. Might is right? The bronze, this is a bronze architectural structure. The bronze for this was pulled from the Pantheon. Yes, so the Barberini Pope kind of pillaged some of the ancient bronze that was found in the portico in the Pantheon. We talked about this in the Brunelleschi lecture. This is the big dome, the big ancient Roman dome, which you can't really see from here, but it was really important for Renaissance artists. And there was a popular contemporary saying, so during Bernini's time, when Bernini was building this, and this was unveiled, and during the Barberini papacy, it says what the barbarians didn't do, the Barberini did. So it's nicely tightly packed in Latin, but basically saying when the barbarians came and pillaged Rome, kind of in the Middle Ages, that they left the bronze alone at least, but the Barberini plundered it. Urban said that he used most of the bronze to make cannons. Okay, we had to fight off the invading hordes. They were for cannons, also for the Baldacchino, but mostly for cannons. Bernini was also commissioned to create this. It's a throne. So this was the original chair for Peter. So the chair of the first pope, the cathedra. And from its humble origins, it's encased in this kind of celestial. There are like four founders of the church, fathers of the church, lifting the chair up, and it's encased. And the Bernini designed all of this. So those are pretty good commissions, you know. Can you design a monument for the tomb and also the chair of the most important apostle figure, probably the most important religious figure behind Christ and Mary, Peter next, I would say, Peter and Paul. So, you know, pretty good. Bernini's doing really, really well for himself. Bernini triumphant. His story takes a bit of a turn, though. Did this go off? Did I lose that? Tech support. I think it's okay. I can just speak up a bit. Okay, I'll just speak up. I've killed the batteries before. I think I told Caleb it was an EMP. I was hit with an EMP pulse, but I think this is still working. Good. Okay, so it wasn't an EMP pulse, guys. It's all right. Just the batteries died. So back to Bernini. Bernini was. He was also commissioned by Pope Urban, the Barberini Pope, to build 2 bell towers. He wanted the facade to be even grander. There was an architect named Carlo Maderno, and the Barberini Pope didn't like Maderno, so he wanted something changed in the facade to make it look, I did this, right? He'll put the B's on it. The Barberini did this. And Bernini built 2 bell towers. I don't know why I'm doing this. They're not there anymore. So basically what happened is Bernini built them, designed it, and he was the chief architect. Urban wanted them revealed in 1641 on the day of, it was the feast day of St. Paul and St. Peter. And so it was kind of a rush project. They unveiled them. Urban's like, okay, they're great, I want them bigger. And so he takes off the top tier and wants Bernini to keep building, going higher and higher and higher. And they basically, they were too big, they were too high, they were built too quickly, and once the construction started to settle and things started to crack, and poor Bernini had to pay for the demolition himself. So out-of-pocket demolition for Bernini, and this was just a couple years before Maffeo Barberini died. So he had a bit of he had great success, and then he had there was a bit of a taper off at the final years of the Barberini Pope. Bad news for Bernini. This guy comes next. So this is Giovanni Battista Pamphili, and he's the subsequent pope, and he goes by the moniker of Innocent X. And can't you tell he's not going to like Bernini, as opposed to Happy Barberini. grumpy, innocent. No, I'm sure he's fine. What happened? The Barberinis and the Borgheses were angling. They were trying to have their cardinal elected. So again, they had these factions of families that were aligned with them, and then there were other factions of families that were against them and trying to get their person in power. And so they have the College of Cardinals, right, where they all get together, and there's the black smoke and the white smoke, and they choose the new pope. The Barberinis didn't smash enough heads together, or didn't pay off enough people, or something, and yes, so the Pamphili pope came to power, and the Pamphilis did not like the Barberinis. So bad news for, where is he? Bad news for Bernini. Yes, so the Pamphili Pope was never, ever, theoretically, going to hire Bernini, because Bernini was so closely affiliated with the Barberini Pope, with the previous Pope. But Pope Innocent II, so this is the Pamphili Pope, was carrying on, though, in this Baroque papal tradition to aggrandize, or to make better the city of Rome. And he was particularly attached to the Piazza Navona. And this is one of the most central places in Rome. If you've been to Rome, you've probably been there. This is a bit of a spoiler. It's really hard to build any kind of a suspense here, because I show you photos and you know what's going to happen. This is the Bernini fountain, the Four Rivers Fountain, which we'll be talking about tonight. So you've probably been there. You've probably seen this. It's very, very famous. The Pamphili family was very connected to the Piazza Navona. Their ancestral family home was on the Piazza Navona. So the Palazzo Pamphili is right here. It's now the Brazilian embassy, randomly. And then they were also very connected to this church here as well. So they were invested in this particular piazza, in this particular square and public space in Rome, and they wanted this square to really pack a punch. And so this is what it looks in present day. That's Bernini's fountain, which we'll talk about soon. It's also very Rome. So Rome of the Renaissance and the Baroque period they're always trying to pull on the memory of ancient Rome and kind of the legacy of ancient Rome, and restore that and renew that, and then show that they're worthy of this great heritage. And the Piazza Navona was very. This is again just another. You can tell the space. It was actually a stadium. So this is the Domitian Stadium. So they had some chariot races, but mostly a kind of athletic contest. So like foot races in here. So it kind of has that. It's still that stadium, that oval shape today. Yeah. So that would be the far south end. And then at the north end, they just did some new excavations. You can actually see some of the original foundations of Domitian Stadium. They could pack 30,000 people in there. The ancient Romans knew how to pack them in. 30,000 people. So this is the Pamphili Palazzo here, and this is one of the churches that they were very closely aligned with. So they wanted something. The Pope Innocent, one of his big art projects was to commission a fountain for the Piazza Navona, an enormous, enormous fountain. Yeah, so this is what it would have looked like in the 1600s, so a little more open. So there was this fountain that Bernini had done in an earlier time period that existed, but this wouldn't have been here. And there's this wonderful story. So as I said, the Pope Innocent, not going to hire Bernini. Bernini is way too, he put too many B's on all of his projects in the last 20 years. Don't want to have anything to do with Bernini. And he was banned from, so there were, the tradition was to have a competition for a big public artwork like this. So there would be a call for artists to submit a maquette or submit a model, which would then be, they would go up against each other, and then a jury or the patron or whoever would pick the best one. And then that artist would be awarded the commission. And so Bernini was banned from the competition. Innocent, I don't even want to see it. Don't even, Bernini, get lost. I don't even want you to participate. And this is a contemporaneous story about this, which I think is just so great. So sinister was, so strong was the sinister influence of the rivals of Bernini in the mind of Innocent. It was the Pantheon Pope. Then when he planned to set up this great fountain in the Piazza Navona, blah, 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 with the obelisk, the Pope had designs made by the leading architects of Rome without an order for one to Bernini. So you can't participate, Bernini. But luckily for Bernini, Prince Niccolo Ludovisi, who was married to the niece of Pope Innocent, he told Bernini to prepare an idea, make a design anyway. And he stuck it in a side room where he knew that the Pope had to go by after his dinner. And so the Pope has his dinner. You can just imagine the scene, and Ludovisi and the Pope are strolling on by. When the meal was finished, seeing such a noble creation, he stopped almost in ecstasy. So he sees the model, the design, without knowing it's Bernini, and loses his mind. Like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever seen, and what is the genius, the mind who's created this? And Ludovisi, like, this is Bernini. But he's done this. He's gone into rapturous praise of Bernini's concept in front of people, so he can't back out because he's the Pope, right? He's the inheritor to the keys and infallible, and so he can't back out now. So he has to hire Bernini, and from then on, Bernini kind of wins Innocent over to his side. And supposedly Innocent remarked that this is a trick be necessary to employ Bernini in spite of those who do not wish it. For he who desires not to use Bernini designs must take care not to see them. And so this is like I said, from a contemporary biography of Bernini. So just to back up a bit, and I want to talk to you about why this commission meant so much. Not just to Innocent, but then also to Bernini. Bernini really wanted this commission. Getting a big fountain like this in Rome was a big deal. And also then to Bernini's supporters. And the thing is that Rome had this incredible, and still does, has this incredible legacy of fountains and of waterworks. And there are 2,000 fountains in Rome. There are dozens and dozens of monumental fountains, like the Trevi Fountain here. And then there are hundreds and hundreds of smaller fountains. And what's really, what makes, I think, Rome a wonderful Baroque city, or really, it kind of ties in very well with the Baroque idea, because it's the way that Rome deploys its fountains and the ways that visitors to Rome encounter the fountains, they're like secret moments of theater. So you're stumbling across something of movement, and that's dramatic and surprising and inspiring. So this is a typical Roman street here. Rome is a city without a grid. It's really hard to know where you're going at any given time. If you've been to Rome, I'm sure you know the feeling of, I think I need to go that way, but the road is going this way. And then you're trying to, well, I'll take a left. And then you take the left, but then all of a sudden it also starts steering this way. And it's really, really challenging to get to if you have a destination in mind, you'll never make it. We had, I did some university courses when I was in university. This is when I kind of first actually started switching to art history. I did I did a couple terms in Rome, and the professors who would just kind of go, if we happened to cross something or if we missed the bus, well, we'll go do this thing instead. And they were the ones where the classes worked really well. We learned a lot. But the professors who had a very rigid schedule, Rome scoffs at rigid schedules and maps or attempts to find your way. So, I think that's maybe, I know Rome for some people, I think when they're visiting Italy, can feel like a very daunting place and can be very frustrating and overwhelming compared to, especially if you've come from places like Siena or Florence, are a little smaller. But Rome will take all plans and expectations and just upend them. So you have to be okay with that. So Rome, back to Rome and the Baroque idea. Typical Roman street, meandering along, and this is what it's like. You're trying to go over here, but the street is leading you this way. But then you stumble upon scenes like this. These 2,000 fountains will pop up at every point, and there's always, like I said, there's always water spurting in some direction. You can always hear water in Rome. So around every corner, you'll find there are these basins as well, these ancient Roman basins that exist. You'll find, Caleb and I have been to Rome lots of times. This is probably the city we know the most, but we'll know theoretically where the Trevi Fountain is. Like, we know how to get there. We can follow a route to get there, but you'll still be wandering around sometimes at nighttime and you think you're one place, but then all of a sudden you just pop out into the Trevi Fountain because there are all of these streets that turn off into this space, and there are these big expansive open piazzas, but there are also lots of very tiny squares with enormously grand fountains in them. So this is the Trevi Fountain. It's after the Baroque period, so I won't be talking about that a lot tonight, but it's great. Watch the Roman Holiday. Audrey Hepburn goes to the Trevi Fountain. I was flipping through, for tonight, I was just in Rome a few months ago, and I was flipping through my photos just to see how much water pops up, how often water pops up in my photos, and it's in every single scene. There is a fountain everywhere. There is water. There's water everywhere in Rome. Oh, and I promised to show, well, I said favorite fountains, and I'll be talking a lot about the Four Rivers Fountain tonight. But I think this is my favorite fountain. This is the Fountain of the Turtles. So it's just around the corner from the Campo de' Fiori in the Jewish ghetto, and it is great. Look at those little turtles. It's just so delightful, right? It's completely charming, Rome. So the question I also want to answer for you tonight, I think this is important, is why? Why Paris doesn't have 2,000 fountains? It's also a really beautiful city. Why Rome? And the answer to this is Agrippa. Caleb's favorite, the man, the myth, the legend, Agrippa. Agrippa is actually, he's a really fascinating political figure in Roman history. He was consul for a number of years. He's a Roman statesman. He played a really important role in the reign of Augustus, and he was involved in the Battle of Actium. And Caleb sent me on a mission. There aren't many busts of Agrippa. One of them, this one, is in the Louvre. It's really hard to find anything in the Louvre, but Caleb's like, don't you leave without finding Agrippa. He's in there somewhere. So we did, eventually. Anyway, Agrippa was the first water commissioner for the Roman Empire, and they had water commissioners since. And Agrippa was very attuned to the importance of good drainage, good sewage, and clean drinking water. So he was responsible for the majority. You can picture the Roman aqueducts, you know, with the tiers. So he was responsible for a lot of the construction of the aqueducts. He dredged out the sewers. There were extensive sewage lines in Rome, and they would dump everything into the Tiber, which would then take it away. But clean drinking water is something that the Roman Empire, and especially Agrippa, they placed an enormous amount of importance on that. And still in Rome today, there are little spouts with water coming out of them, and you can just stick your head under the little spout and drink the water. The water is very clean and very safe. And it's kind of famous for its water quality. This is I want to pop this back up. Everyone kind of recognizes Agrippa's name, like Agrippa. Why is that familiar? He's right here. He's on the Pantheon. He built this. I mean, okay, this is a replica built by Hadrian, but the original was built by Agrippa. And this basically says Agrippa, son of somebody, made this. Yeah. Anyway, so that's Agrippa for some context. But these are his aqueducts. So here's Rome, and then the aqueducts leading into Rome extend enormously far away. Look at this. But the main one, the Aqua Virgo. Here, this is like one of the aqueducts in Rome. The Aqua Virgo supplies all of the famous fountains in Rome. They're all operated by gravity. So some of them have a really high elevation. So some of these other ones, you know, they start off really high, so then gravity pushes them. So then some of the fountains, they can have this spurting action, right? You can get kind of big jets of water. But the Aqua Virgo only has it's like a 20-foot elevation from the source. So there's not a lot of jetting water for the fountains in the Campo de Fiori or the Piazza Navona, or some of the big ones in the Piazza del Popolo. The Trevi Fountain, it also feeds the Trevi Fountain. The artists then have to rely more on like tumbling water. So if you think of the Trevi, it's the water's kind of tumbling over the sculptures, right? So it's kind of creating drama and interest through that, as opposed to like big waterworks. But this is Agrippa's. This is Agrippa's from this 2,000-year-old aqueduct, which is supplying all of the famous fountains of not all of them, but the big fountains in Rome. So back to the Piazza Navona and Bernini's Fountain of the Four Rivers. So like I said, back to the Barberini Pope, he sees Bernini's design and all right, Bernini, go ahead, do your thing. So Bernini comes up with a concept based on the four rivers. And this I think is so why I wanted to show you this tonight, because it shows the artistic, kind of the aesthetic thrust of the Baroque period, so the idea of drama and theater and movement. And what better way, just a side note, what better way, there was a real flowering or flourishing of fountain architecture and sculpture in the Baroque period, because they were always trying to, again, get at this idea of movement and kind of tension and kinetic energy. What better way to demonstrate movement by having water flow all through, like literal movement. So fountains work really well with the Baroque idea. And it also, this particular fountain is a great example also of the spiritual and the political idea behind the Baroque, because like I said, the Baroque in Italy was part of the Counter-Reformation, so it's the Catholic Church reasserting its dominion over the souls of the world. And this is called the Four Rivers, and each figure here represents a river from all of the continents in the world. So. Okay, it's a bit of a stretch. So they have Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Americas. But it's again, a kind of a representation, a propagandistic representation of the Catholic Church dominion over the world. So here we have this a white marble structure. This is, I don't think it's as flashy as the bees, but the Fili emblem is a dove with an olive branch. The keys, again. And there is an obelisk at the center, like we read about just briefly before, and there are these four major figures, and then underneath them there's a series of animals and kind of the water that's shooting out and tumbling in all directions. So it's a combination of natural elements, so these kind of roughly hewn rocks, and then these gargantuan figures kind of striding upon them. So this is the figure of the Ganges. He has a pole here, and there is an elephant tucked in here somewhere also. So they have animals and kind of symbols of each continent, of each river god. But look, that idea, we saw that with Bernini's David, that they're not posed in repose. So they're not contained within their space. That there's movement here. He's about to lift his leg or pry the pole. His foot is shooting out into space. This is the figure of the Nile. He has a cloth draped over his head. And there's the palm trees, the palm fronds here represent the Nile. There's also a lion under here, or under the figure of the Nile, the river god. This is the river that is to symbolize the Americas, the Rio de la Plata. And this figure looks like he's falling backwards, so he's tumbling also in space, and his arm is outstretched. So that idea that we're catching him just in one particular moment of time. There's a story about do I have an image of? Let me show you. Okay. You'll hear this from Roman tour guides all the time. If you go on like one of those hop-on, hop-off buses, they'll talk about the Rio de la Plata god has his hand outstretched like this, and it looks like he's shielding his eyes from something, like the sun, for instance. There's a great story. It's not true. I wish it was true. It would be so great. But there's a rivalry between two architects, more B's. There's Bernini and then there's Borromini. And Borromini designed the facade of this church. So the kind of cheap tours will always say that Bernini thought that Borromini's design was so ugly that his river god is shielding his eyes. And everyone, oh, that's so great. It's not true. This was constructed before Borromini's design, alas. But it is a great story, and there was a rivalry between Bernini and Borromini, but that's a story maybe for another time when we get back to Italy someday. Did I show this one? Oh, this is the Danube. See, they're all moving. They're all moving. Like they all look like they're about to turn and stand up and like lift the obelisk or something. The way their hands are outstretched here. There's a horse under the river god representing the Danube. And there it is. So this is probably, other than the Trevi Fountain, which is fine, it's nice, it's a little over the top, I think, it's a little garish. That's why I didn't talk about it too much tonight. But it's like I said, it's after the Baroque period. But I think, like personally, I think this is the major triumph of Baroque public art, right here with Bernini's fountain, and the idea too that one can see it from all angles. So the Baroque idea is that it's not operating within a niche, that we can see it from every angle, and there's something new and interesting to look at. And that's why it's really hard actually to show you this work, because it has to be seen from 100 different angles in order to really get a sense of it. But there's always a crowd, there are always buskers, people selling paintings and drawings. Like, this is really, I think, maybe the center of Roman life for all of those reasons that I talked about. So the connection, the Roman connection with water, and the connection with ancient Rome, and then also the handy-dandy propagandistic value here. Up next, we're going to France. We're talking about, so in a couple weeks at the end of October, just a note as well, the lectures will go back to our normal time slot of 7:30. I did shift it to 8:30 or 8 o'clock, sorry, here in the summertime, because I need it to be dark, right, to show paintings. But it's dark now, so back to 7:30. And so we'll be talking about French Impressionism, and this next lecture will be kind of setting up the next few months. We'll be talking about the whole. This always happens, that there's a gang of artists who are all pals, and they're all doing really important things. So Manet knew Monet, and Monet was pals. They were pals with Renoir, and Degas was also there, and they all hung out at this one cafe. And so we'll be talking about, essentially they changed everything. So there are all of these rules that were established after the Baroque period, and they were set for a number, probably 3 centuries. And then these artists, so Manet, Monet, and the gang, Courbet, they came along, and like the rules, they just dispensed with all rules. So we're moving on to Paris. I'll talk about why they're such a big deal. Just one other thing. This is a kind of a shameless moment of self-promotion. But I'm working really hard on this all week, so I have to tell you. I just launched. This isn't connected with art history at all. This is my studio. I just launched this today. 2020 is my 10th year of being like a practicing artist. I opened my studio 10 years ago here in St. John, and I wanted to do a big year-long project to celebrate that and have something at the end of it. So I'm doing 100 12-inch by 12-inch paintings, and they're following a route around St. John, and they're kind of my usual. This is kind of all of the things that I find really interesting and compelling about St. John. And then we'll have an exhibition here in October. So all the information is here, and we have stuff going on with that, and I'll be posting lots about it over the next year. So anyways, that's what I'm up to at the studio. So I just wanted to show you. Like I said, we've been slugging away at that for a while to get it ready. But it's out there now, and it's out in the world, and I have a video showing a bit of my studio and kind of explaining what the project's about. So you can go find that. And yes, maybe I'll look to see you at the end of October, hopefully, as we start talking about Impressionism. Great, thank you, everyone. Thank you.